This is one of those $80 clutch kits. It comes mostly complete. I had to put a shim in between here to shim this off of the shaft because it was grabbing onto the belt at idle, and that's pretty much what I had to do there. There's an internal two rods that the clutch expands upon, and one of those rods came out right away after about a mile. So I had to drill a hole and put a pin in there to keep it from sliding. It's cast into the aluminum underneath the housing there. Then the plate that bolts to the engine broke in half, and because it's just cheap pot metal. Another thing to consider when ordering a $80 clutch kit. If I was to do it again, I would certainly go with the Comet. They're about $230, but well worth it. As you can see, I had to make a steel plate right here, and bearing housing on the back. Also had to make that drive shaft so the gear, or so the sprocket would be in line on the other side. The way it came, the sprocket was in between here, and this would space out a bit more. And I also put a double roller sealed bearings on the end right behind the sprocket there, and it is welded to a bracket that bolts to the frame to keep the jack shaft from flexing. If you don't do that, even with the stock plate, I'm sure that's why it broke the stock plate, when you run it, if you look down at it, you'll see that it flexes when you give it the gas. But that bearing on the other end of the jack shaft, I'm hoping that's coming in okay. The sun's right on my, oh yeah, there we go. Right there in the center on the other side of the chain is it's just a pipe with two bearings in it. The piece of pipe is just like an 1.5 inch width with the bearing on each side that is welded to a piece of angle iron that then bolts to the frame. And that eliminates all the all of the flex that you get out of there. And up front I used one half of the original aluminum plate that came with it. Right here I used that as a spacer so I could keep my alignment that I originally had. And it's another Snowblower motor. It's an 8-horse Tecumseh. It's an older style. I'm not sure, it's not overhead valve. I don't know what you'd call it, L block maybe. I'm not sure. But and then the cover, the secondary clutch is 7-inch. The cover that it came with it was too small, and so I had to split the cover into 4 pieces, down the middle and up and down the middle, vertical and horizontally. And then I used some stir sticks and spaced it all 1 inch apart, and took a fiberglass mold off of that to end up with this right here. I did it pretty rough. I didn't finish it out or anything, but that's the cover. So we'll put it on, fire this thing up. It's been sitting for a couple weeks. It's been raining like crazy here for the last 2 weeks, so the sun is finally peeking out, and we'll give it a pull and get her running and take her down the street. This bike was a '88 Yamaha DT 50. It's a neat little motor. It's a little 2-stroke liquid cooled, I think it's 49 cc. Worked really well, but I think they were just kind of overbuilt. They were asking too much out of that little tiny motor, and it didn't last maybe 400 miles. The odometer on this bike is 489.1. I probably put 20 of those miles on with this motor. I haven't ridden it a whole bunch, but I hadn't seen any of these bikes on YouTube of people doing this with these Briggs & Stratton Tecumseh style motors onto motorcycles. They've always been mini bikes and go-kart stuff, but this one I just the rear sprocket is stock, and the front sprocket, I believe, came with the clutch, so I couldn't tell you what the gearing is there, but the gearing seems to be fine with the clutch. It's got plenty of low end, and I've had it up to 50 miles an hour, and it does okay. I left the governor on it. It's kind of different to ride. You just give it gas, the motor doesn't rev any higher, it just kind of stays at the same, and it just starts going, and it does surprisingly well for what it is. So I did have to cut the front of the frame and move it down and out, and then welded it all back together so that motor would fit in there. It's a pretty snug fit. As you can see, I had to remove the electric start, which would be right up there in front. It's pretty close to fitting. I could probably chisel away at the inside of the frame there and get the electric start to fit back on there, which I would actually like to do. It does start fine. We'll give it a good few pulls, and it should start right up. And like I say, it's been sitting for at least 2 weeks, so we'll put the cover back on and give it a shot. On the top of the petcock, I had a little bit of clearance issues up in here. I just kind of dented it down there, and I drilled a hole in the wrong spot. This was quite the project, actually, to get everything to line up. But I had to put an air cleaner, as again, it's a snowblower motor, and I had to make like a manifold that bolts onto the front of the carburetor back in here, and then this air cleaner come off of like an old generator that was blown up, so I just took some parts and pieces off of it. And I do have a title for this bike. It can be made street legal. I don't have an electrical system on it, but I think I can come up with something with maybe some LEDs and a small battery. I do have all the brake switch in here and all the extra pieces and stuff, so it's kind of stripped down still, but we'll take it for a spin. Okay, I don't have a mount or anything for this camera, so it's going to be a one-handed ordeal here. So I've got the choke on, and like I say, it's been a cool start. I turned the gas on. Okay, I had the kill switch was off. Let's try it again. That is the cover. Okay, let's see if we can do this. Miles an hour.
riding over one-handed. And I need to adjust the brakes. They are a little light.